Thank you, Miloš. Good morning, everyone, and I would like to thank Sasha Ljuboja, my friend, for inviting me over. It's an honor and pleasure for me. We don't have much time, so let's start off. As for obesity, there is an epidemic of obesity. A friend of me, Sokol Sokolovic, an academician and a university professor, I told him, he said at that time, when you are obese, it means you are not really a well-bred person. But then, as I was researching genetics and epigenetics, I realized it's not really like that. We should not, of course, blame the people who are obese, but rather try and help them out, regain balance and homeostasis. As we know, all diseases are psychosomatic diseases, and mens sana in corpore sano is the old Latin proverb. I think that when your mind is healthy, then your body also will be healthy. But we have lost the balance, and there is a disbalance of homeostasis. And one of the key areas is genetics and epigenetics of obesity. If we take a look at standard genetics, we'll see that genetics is researching into DNA of our genetics, whereas epigenetics means epi, outside of genetics. So it actually examines all other things that lead to obesity, something outside of genetics. So obesity can be treated as a condition or as a disease. And there is a fine line between the two. Why? Because even if a person is obese and doesn't have any health issues, sooner or later these health problems will be developed. Of course, it also may lead to hypertension, disbalance of status of lipids, then diabetes mellitus, insulin resistance, obstipation, apnea. These are all diseases that are connected with obesity. Obesity of 10% of body mass index is pre-obesity, and that of more than 20% is deemed as extreme obesity. There is a study in Copenhagen that has been going on for 40 years, and over 100,000 things were covered by the study. Being a little bit obese, just a little bit above the BMI, is not such a bad thing. These persons have better values when it comes to high density lipoprotein, less likely to suffer from heartbreak and cardiovascular diseases, and are more sexually active. And if a man tries to lose weight, even when we lose 6% of our body weight, different hormones are being discharged, and we get more hungry. And then we put ourselves in the restrictive survival mode. Genetically, we don't have a gene for losing weight. We only have a gene to accumulate energy. But how can we deal with it? It's hypokinesis. The problem is hypokinesis, which is not moving enough, lack of movement. So we all tried, for example, when we came here, to park the car just in front of the hotel rather than walk, for example, 1 kilometer. I have clients who come for my training, who would really do everything within 1 hour, but still would wait for the lift to climb up only 2 stairs. So hypokinesis has affected biokinetics of our back, of our spine, because nowadays people live sedentary life. There is the graph of body mass index that has been on for 1934 till 1214. Sorry, 1984 till 2014. This is for the US citizens. So over 60% of us has surplus of fats in our body. And obesity is one of the greatest challenges of modern science and modern medicine. And the obesity has been tripled since the 80s to date, mostly because of hypokinesis. You can see that there are over 1 billion of people all over the world who are obese, according to the Lancet magazine, out of which over 800 million are adults and about 100 million are children. And the observed is that the same number is the number of the people who are hungry. So over obese, there are 30% of them, 36% and 20% of obese. This is a map of impacts on obesity. It's a kind of graph or a map, as you can see. Then one day I realized I really have to inquire into this topic. Shift company is developing maps and graphs when they need to explain some area of life in a visually acceptable manner. In the very center of this map, just for you to understand how many epigenetic factors there are. So in the middle of it is energy balance, the balance that we talked about. All closer factors, those that are closer to the center, have impact the disbalance of energy balance. But these are interrupted lines and full lines. Some of them positively affect the energy balance, the other affect negatively energy balance. And their motto is to actually explain the complexity of obesity in a simple way. For example, in Belgrade, there are so many fitness centers. There are so many nutritionists. But we've never had, in spite of that, so many ill and people and obese people, which actually shows that even the recommendations of doctors, of modern medicine, they keep saying be more physically active and eat less. None of it works, obviously. And one of the reasons for it is that there are so many subclusters that impact the energy balance. For example, individual psychology, social psychology, individual activity, activity of the environment, food production, food consumption, individual and general physiology. Even pathophysiology can be added here. Plus, there are the impacts of some other clusters from this map. Take a look at the impact of the media, social factor, psychological, economic, medical, biological, and so on. All these factors in their own right impact the disturbance of the balance. If we take out just one part of the map and see the level of available energy, imagine if here in front there was some catering served to us. We all would eat at least something from it. Or if I ask my clients, do you stick with your nutrition plan? They say yes, and how do you manage it? they said, yes, I skip my meals. But if you work in an office, do you take the food offered to you by your colleagues? Yes. So a person that way disturbs energy balance, or else reliance on pharmaceutical drugs. I want to lose weight. Give me a magic stick, a supplement that will make me lose weight or help me. Or the level of activity in childhood is another important thing. That sub-factor says if the kids who are extremely physically active throughout their childhood are less likely to be obese when they grow up. When we ask our clients of our age, were you brought up? Did you were involved in sports? For example, the kids who were raised in a rural area, who would carry logs or do some other field works, will actually contribute to this child not disturbing energy balance. It depends on whether we as parents and society invest into our kids being physically active. Then modeling of activity by parents. That's an important thing. So if we go to holiday to an all-inclusive hotel and you keep eating all day long and doing nothing. And then you can have an active holiday where you will be hiking, swimming, and so on. For example, when we have some kind of holidays in this country, we usually want to prepare some good food and indulge in it. So this all will eventually lead to the disturbance of energy balance. So I wanted to explain in this map that this is a very complex area and to show you how there are so many epigenetic factors that may lead to the disturbance of energy balance. The environment cannot be an isolated factor that impacts the body mass index. So why are we obese requires the examining of the reasons as to why some people eat more and why some people are metabolically more efficient and lose more energy, consume more energy. For example, you have friends who eat a lot, but they don't gain weight. And then it may be confusing. Then we try to follow the instructions of our fitness coaches, and so on. And we mostly think about the nutrition plan and some kind of exercises, rather than whether this nutrition and this physical exercise will give you such a texture that a person feels well, is healthy, and not just looks good. So in order to understand biological varieties, we need to understand the varieties in genetic heritage. Jason Yellow, a scientist from Cambridge Institute, and is dealing with epigenetics of obesity. In one of his books, Nutrition in the Genes, in Your Genes, that's the name of his book. So, for example, if we had catering served here and you were able to take something from there, he would say, the scientist says, there are 4 main groups of people when it comes to their attitude towards food. So some of you, if some catering were served here, would be listening to me, go up and eat a little bit. Some would stand up, take something from that catering and would keep eating and not listen. And then the final group, if you ask them after the lecture, which part did you like better, the sweet food or the salty food, they would say, I have no idea. Do you remember what you ate? They would say, no, I wouldn't remember what I ate. So the business people often go home, keep talking, open up the fridge, keep eating while they are talking, and then after that they even want to have dinner. So this is an attitude towards food. Secondly, we need to deserve the meal. For example, if the catering was served here, I would take a look at it and then I would think twice whether to help myself with some of that food. So if I'm going to have a training or not. So have I deserved this meal or not? This is a gene that we inherited when we had to hunt down animals in order to survive, to eat them. Then there is the so-called epigenetic imprint, another important thing. So this, when you are young, I can go out, eat, smoke, and so on. But throughout that period, we imprint this into our genes, and our descendants may activate these genes. So it's not irrelevant as to what kind of genetics we have. It is also important how we behave in terms of epigenetics. There was a research that I found, namely in Sweden, in the last century, a lot of people died out of hunger because there was not enough potatoes. So several million people died. And it was at the beginning of the 20th century, namely in 1905. So the people, when they had enough food, in the years when there was a lot of food, they would eat as much as they could because they were afraid that years of hunger may come. So what did they do? They left a gene of obesity to their descendants, and their grandchildren would suffer from myocarditis twice more than they would. Or when for example, the women who deliver babies and immediately after delivery, they want to remain fit. In order to do this, they have to take up restrictive foods to be physically active, not to take up too much food, and then they overdo it. What happens to the child who was born? They were imprinted the obesity gene, and they are likely to get the diabetes. What about another pregnant woman who would eat too much? Who is overeating, or she is eating for two persons, not just for one. There's a saying in Serbian. According to different studies, there is high likelihood for that child to get diabetes. So this genetic imprint is important both of us and it's important not just for our children, but also grandchildren and great-grandchildren. What are the fats in our body? We have adipocytes or lipid or lipid droplets. So depending on how many adipocytes we have in the body, we always have a certain number of adipocytes in our body. We may sometimes reduce the quantity, we can empty the droplet. However, they're just waiting for you to eat more so that these droplets are filled, and then they multiply. So when the adipocytes explode, that would discharge cytokines and other inflammatory diseases. And if you remember, in COVID time, in addition to elderly people, the obese people were at jeopardy because their immune system was irritated due to obesity. If a person has too many calories accumulated in their bodies, we have several types of adipose cells. The white ones, there is subcutaneous fat tissue, which is also protective for us. It's not so damaging for us and harmful. The biggest problem is with the brown fat cells, which store energy, discharge heat. And this surplus of energy through these droplets of triglycerides, together with some other cells, are metabolically active. We cannot impact that activity. And there are 130 different hormones are discharged by adipocytes, and they behave independently of our body. Some kind of beige fat cells were discovered, and they permeate the brown fat tissue. And it is thought that this beige fat is especially important for the treatment and healing of some metabolical disbalances. Hormone leptin is something that you might have heard about. Friedman Laboratory reported in 1994 that they discovered the mutation of this gene, and they call it leptin. The leptin is a hormone of hunger. So when the leptin was discovered, everyone thought it was a drug or medicament for obesity. However, only with the people who don't have the capability of reproducing adipose tissue, they were treated with this leptin, but not the obese people. If we take a look at the structure of the brain, so brain makes out 3% of body mass, whereas 90% of glucose is consumed by our brain. Then what does our body do in the face of hunger? Our body is filtering out the distribution of energies. For example, if you're extremely hungry, for example, you didn't eat anything for 2 or 3 days, or if you were detained, captured, or in a situation, you remember people becoming cannibalistic because they had nothing else to eat. At that moment, the brain has a desire to survive, and it is shutting down all other functions of the body. Primarily, the reproductive function would be closed down. I once spoke in a podcast about artificial infertilization. Why do the obese women who are on different diets also have a problem with becoming pregnant, not even with IVF, because their brain is shutting down reproductive functions because that woman is on and off on a hunger regime. On the other hand,
an expensive metabolic function that the body has is the immune system, and it shuts down also. And very often, in the case of athletes, particularly in martial arts, they embark upon a restrictive regime, food intake, in order to get into a category. And we are monitoring how many times a year they have cold. We think that athletes are healthy, but they are exposed to stress. And we therefore test all our athletes and recreational athletes, and they get supplementation, omega-3 acids, so all based on a broader image and broader idea how the brain operates. Leptin circulates in the blood, and it sends information about the amount of fat tissue in brain, and some reserves of glycogen in muscles is about 450 kilocalories in muscles, about 500 in liver. So we have about 1,000 kilocalories in the body. And the question can be asked why obesity is not healthy. We mentioned all the diseases that it can cause. On the other hand, overweight can be an aggravating factor. You will be less physically active, you will lose the muscle mass, you will have apnea, cardiac arrhythmia. We have two types of obesity, apple-like and pear-like shape. So this apple-like is typical of man, and this central obesity that is very dangerous because we have this accumulation of visceral fats that are metabolically active, and this pear shape is typical of women in most of the cases. As for the lipotoxicity in the body and the question why the excessive amount of fats leads to some disease, we have three schools of thinking. First is lipotoxicity. That means a toxicity in our body because of fats. So fats this way get a bad reputation, but at the end of the day, they're also protecting us, and you will see why. What happens when fat storages are completely filled? So you heard about insulin resistance, and that's why we have this great misconception. You heard about polycystic ovaries, fat liver, Alzheimer, insulin resistance of brain, polycystic ovaries, insulin resistance at the level of ovaries, and on different organs. This means that these organs accumulate fats in them, particularly liver. They're a depot of glycogens. So that's how it reduces the possibility to provide energy for you when you need it. And that's how insulin resistance occurs. And this is actually pre-diabetes. And what does it mean to what this phrase means, maximum capacity that a person can genetically carry? We have 50% of people who have diabetes or insulin resistance, but they're not obese. It means that their body cannot accumulate subcutaneous fats. So we then have accelerated accumulation of fat in the mentioned body organs. Dr. Stephen O'Reilly described that in a research as a tap, and you just let water flow into it and open the bottom. So this is the energy balance. As much water comes in, that much water will get out. So what will happen if I eat more, if the tap is open? If I eat more, it will accumulate and it will overflow. So we have different capacities of a bathtub. You will see a person with 265 kilograms. He had 305 kilograms at one point in time. Now he is down to much less, but he's completely healthy. So he has this huge capacity of this bathtub. Most of us wouldn't have survived this, probably, if we had been in this phase. So I also wanted to know if we go to liposuction. I will finish very soon. I was researching. You will have these problems and those problems, but nobody says that they will get insulin resistance. If you remove an important organ from the body and you don't change habits, then the surplus has no place to accumulate. So you have healthy people who resort to these methods in order to look better. That I told you this. And the third school is the state of chronic inflammation. And they lead to inflammatory processes and they will undermine health, definitely. Why our brain becomes choosy? You were all on different celebrations, weddings, St. Patrick's Days, 5-course meals. You eat and then you can't take anymore. People keep offering you food, and you say, I can't have anything more. And then a cake comes, and you can accumulate another 1,000 calories without any problem. And if it's anything else but the cake, you would feel the urge to vomit. So that is also evolution, an evolutive development. He had prehistoric man had to hunt, and he was trying to fill his glycogen depots with other sources of food that are not of animal origin, to eat some fruit, some vegetable, also a bear catching a salmon. So he eats different parts of the fish on 3 days, and he leaves the fattiest part for the end so that he can fill in the depots. So this mechanism is something inherited from evolution. Doctor, I'm an idiot. Why, Archie? I was eating everything, starting with the soup, then all kinds of meat and hors d'oeuvres, all kinds of meat, cakes of all kinds, and that was all just the appetizer, just to cheer you up a little bit. Just 2 more minutes. Studies, this an MRI of brain, receptors for cocaine and sugar are in the same place. So sugar dependence is the same mechanism as cocaine. General recommendations: we have polypill and polymill studies. Polypill has cardiovascular diseases. People get therapy and risk is lowered. But these drugs are detrimental. So there was a study and to see what people should eat to reduce the risk of cardiovascular diseases. Red wine, fish, dark chocolate, fruit and vegetables, garlic, almond and olive oil. And these are recommendations of the Mayo Clinic. First, for cereals, vegetables as much as possible, citrus, berries, then other types of fruits and nuts and seeds and still. Then glass of red wine, fish and seafood, chicken, and then in the end red meat. So these are the latest recommendations regarding eating to improve the quality of life. This is how this looks like with the ingredients, with the recipes. We did that for the purposes of my doctoral thesis, and Dr. Jason said the food should be your medicine and medicine should be your food.